We've all felt that burning desire for payback when someone wrongs us. But what happens when that fantasy becomes reality? In this video, we're uncovering 6 of the most horrifying revenge fatalities ever recorded. It was August 12, 2016, in Detroit, Michigan. The night was thick with summer humidity and the low rumble of engines outside a boxing club. The last card had ended hours earlier, but the tension in the air hadn't cooled. Marcus Mac DeLeon was 28, an amateur boxer with more anger than discipline. He worked delivery shifts for a courier service, scraping together entry fees for local bouts. His coaches said he had raw power, but no control, in or out of the ring. His main fixation was Terrence Cole, a calm, methodical fighter who had beaten him cleanly on points just a week earlier. The loss festered. Mac told friends that Cole's post-fight grin was straight-up disrespect, that he needed to set the record straight. Detroit's club circuit was a mix of pride and small-time chaos. Fighters like Mac were half promoted by local gyms and half managed by their own bravado. The East Side Club's rear alley was a known hangout. Dim lighting, a dumpster, and a narrow exit to the street. That Friday, Terrence had another match on the same card, an exhibition meant to showcase his technique before a regional tournament. Mac wasn't on the roster. He showed up anyway, slipping through the crowd near the back with a hooded sweatshirt and his phone in his pocket. Around midnight, Terrence left through the side door with his trainer and a few friends, laughing as they reviewed the match. CCTV footage later showed Mac emerging seconds after. He crossed the lot fast. Witnesses said he shouted first, something about respect, about being set up. Terrence turned, calm but tired, gesturing toward his trainer as if to walk away. The footage caught the flash of a shove, then a blur of movement. Moments later, Terrence stumbled backward, clutching his side. Mac's arm moved again, deliberate and fast, before he backed away. Breathing hard, knife visible in his hand, Terrence collapsed beside the dumpster. His friends screamed for help while Mac disappeared into the dark. A bystander called 911 within 90 seconds of the fight ending. Police arrived within minutes. Terrence was still conscious when paramedics reached him, able to answer briefly before losing consciousness. But his condition deteriorated en route to Detroit Receiving Hospital. He was pronounced dead less than an hour later from massive internal bleeding. Investigators pieced the sequence together quickly. Security footage, multiple phone videos, and witness statements left little room for ambiguity. Mac's car was found abandoned 2 miles away. A search of his apartment revealed clothing with blood traces matching Terrence's DNA. The weapon, a folding knife, was recovered from a storm drain near the club. Mac was arrested at a cousin's house 2 days later without resistance. During interrogation, he claimed self-defense, but evidence contradicted him. The knife wounds were angled downward, consistent with aggression. Surveillance timestamps matched witness accounts to the second. At trial, prosecutors framed the killing as an escalation of obsession and humiliation. The defense called it a tragic street misunderstanding. Court transcripts showed Mac expressing regret, but never admitting intent. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before convicting Mac DeLeon of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 20 years in state prison. It was June 9, 2017, in Barcelona, Spain. The evening light fell softly over Plaza de la Villa. Crowds moved lazily between cafes and tram stops. No one noticed the man in the dark jacket at first, watching from the far side of the square, his stillness breaking the rhythm of the city. Marta Ruiz was 26, a language instructor at a small private academy in Gracia. Her work was steady, her students liked her, and she supplemented her modest income by tutoring tourists who wanted to sound local. She posted about everything: the best neighborhood bakeries, weekend hikes, exhibitions at the Museo Picasso. Her tone was warm and unguarded, the kind of friendliness that drew strangers easily. Among her followers was Raul Vendrell, a 29-year-old warehouse clerk. He lived alone in a small flat and worked night shifts, managing freight inventory for a shipping company. He rarely spoke to co-workers. What began as casual interest in Marta's posts became routine, then fixation. Each photo and caption seemed to him a message. Her meals, her gym sessions, even a brief mention of a new boyfriend triggered something sharp and restless in him. Raoul studied the timing of her uploads, mapped her locations, and began frequenting the places she tagged. Marta blocked one of his accounts, forcing him to create alternate ones. That week, Marta had finished her spring term at the academy and met friends for dinner at a cafe near Plaza de la Vila. It was a mild evening, damp after light rain. Around 8 p.m., she said her goodbyes, shouldered her small purse, and walked toward her usual bus stop. Security footage later confirmed she lingered by the square fountain to check her phone before heading down Carrer de Sant Josep Oriol. Footage from a nearby cafe's security camera later captured another figure appearing moments later, matching Raoul's build and gait. In the following minute of footage, Marta is seen adjusting her hair, unaware of the man closing in from behind. Witnesses later described hearing two sharp cracks, metallic, distinct from the street noise. Marta dropped immediately, collapsing onto the stone walkway near the fountain's rim. One round entered through her upper back, another through the left side of her neck, both fired from close range. Panic spread instantly as cafe patrons screamed and ducked for cover. The gunman stood over her briefly, motionless, then turned and walked swiftly toward the nearest alley. A street musician nearby ran for help. Police arrived within 4 minutes. Marta was found with faint pulse but severe blood loss. Paramedics worked to stabilize her before transport, but she was pronounced dead upon arrival at Hospital de Sant Pau. Traffic cameras and toll data tracked Raoul's movements that night. He drove south toward his apartment near the industrial district, parked in the lot, and did not re-emerge. The next morning, his body was found hanging from a ceiling beam. Inside his flat, investigators found the handgun, later identified as a .32 caliber revolver. The weapon was unregistered and believed to have been purchased through an illegal private sale several months earlier. His laptop was also open on Marta's social media page. Files recovered from his hard drive included hundreds of saved images, location logs, and months of unsent letters addressed to her. A document titled "She Chose Wrong" outlined the sequence of the attack and his planned suicide. Police ruled the case a premeditated murder-suicide fueled by digital obsession and social fixation. Local authorities issued a statement urging caution over online exposure and routine sharing of personal information. The language school held a brief memorial, closing for 2 days. Marta Ruiz was buried in Montjuic Cemetery under a gray sky, her students leaving small folded notes in place of flowers. It was March 22nd, 2015, in a quiet cul-de-sac in suburban Nottinghamshire, England. By mid-morning, that silence would be broken by a single, dull explosion that shattered the calm and left a neighborhood staring at a blackened doorway. Helen Barrett was 52, a longtime resident of the estate and a part-time administrative clerk at a dental practice in nearby Newark. Her life had been quietly unraveling for nearly a year. After a messy separation from her ex-partner, Paul Barrett, she'd become entangled in custody disputes over shared property and finances. Neighbors described her as tense but polite, often stepping outside to smoke on the porch during calls that ended with slamming doors or raised voices. Paul, 54, had once worked as an electrician, but after the breakup, he drifted between odd jobs, showing up unannounced to argue or collect what he claimed was his. The separation grew into an escalating feud, marked by restraining orders and repeated police visits. The Barrett home was typical for the area. 2 stories, gas heating, and a small back garden bordered by hedges. Helen had recently complained about strange disturbances behind the property, lights flickering, the faint smell of gas near the kitchen vent, and footprints by the back fence. She mentioned these to friends and to local police, but nothing came of it. 2 days before the incident, she told a co-worker she thought Paul had been near the back of the house again. Their initial assumption was paranoia. That Sunday began uneventfully. Around 8:15 a.m., rain was falling lightly. Visibility was poor. Helen was likely in the kitchen, making tea or checking her phone. Forensic analysis would later suggest that someone had entered the rear garden, removed the access panel to the property's exterior gas meter box using a wrench or meter key, and interfered with the valve controlling flow to the internal system. The result was a slow, steady release of natural gas into the lower rooms. With the windows closed against the damp morning, the mixture thickened unnoticed. By 8:47 a.m., a spark from a light switch or the refrigerator's compressor relay triggered ignition. The pressure wave ripped through the kitchen and front hallway, blowing the front door off its hinges and sending fragments of glass and insulation across the street. The blast wasn't large enough to level the house, but strong enough to cause fatal internal injuries. A neighbor, stepping out for a newspaper, heard the boom and saw the front window collapse outward in a plume of smoke. Fire crews arrived within 10 minutes. Helen was found near the hallway, likely moving toward the door when the explosion occurred. Helen Barrett was pronounced dead at the scene once fire crews confirmed the property was safe for paramedics to enter. She had suffered massive internal trauma and burns consistent with close-range blast exposure. Fire investigators determined there were no signs of accelerant or electrical malfunction. The focus quickly shifted to the gas system. The main valve showed wrench marks, inconsistent with normal use, and residue of disturbed soil suggested recent tampering. CCTV footage from nearby homes captured Paul's car leaving the area less than 15 minutes before the blast. When police traced his movements, they found internet searches on his phone regarding gas pressure control and ignition times. A recorded call to a friend the previous week mentioned scaring her a bit, so she'll move out. During questioning, Paul denied intent to kill, claiming only to have wanted to cause damage. Forensic and digital evidence contradicted him. The prosecution argued the act was deliberate sabotage. The court, while accepting that murder was not proven, found him guilty of manslaughter due to reckless endangerment. He received a 17-year prison sentence. It was April 12, 2018, in Phoenix, Arizona. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the strip mall parking lot off 7th Street, where commuters drifted in and out of convenience stores, fast food chains, and small offices. It was an ordinary weekday scene, unremarkable, quiet. But beneath the surface, resentment and humiliation had been simmering for months, waiting for a chance to ignite. Samuel Ortega, 34, worked as a freelance graphic designer from a rented apartment downtown. He made a modest living producing branding kits and social media layouts for small businesses across the Phoenix area. He'd built a reputation for being sharp, reliable, and outspoken online, traits that helped attract clients but also made him confrontational in local digital circles. Among those he crossed paths with was Victor Salas, 52, who owned a small print and souvenir shop not far from Samuel's usual haunts. Their conflict began over a failed project inquiry, but turned personal after Samuel mocked Victor's poorly written messages and thinly veiled harassment. Samuel's decision to post screenshots of those exchanges, captioned with biting commentary, spread quickly in local business groups. The post branded Victor as the creep from 7th Street. Within days, his shop's online reviews plummeted. He lost walk-ins, faced refunds, and grew increasingly paranoid that people recognized him. While Samuel moved on to new clients, Victor stewed in humiliation. His Facebook posts became erratic, rants about fake professionals and cowards hiding behind screens. For those around him, it looked like a man unraveling. That Friday afternoon, Samuel had arranged to meet a small business owner at the strip mall cafe to discuss a rebranding project. He posted about the meeting location publicly, tagging the cafe's name for exposure. Victor saw it within minutes. According to GPS data later retrieved from his truck, he left his shop less than 10 minutes after viewing the post. Samuel, unaware, had already finished the meeting and was loading his portfolio case into his compact hatchback. Security footage later showed Victor walking briskly toward him, gesturing with one hand, his other concealed near his waistband. The audio-less video captured a brief exchange. Samuel turning, arms slightly raised in a dismissive motion. Several witnesses described hearing one short argument, then a single gunshot that echoed across the parking lot. Samuel fell immediately, clutching his chest. Witnesses described a small caliber handgun, likely a .380 or 9mm pistol, consistent with the shell casing recovered at the scene. Victor returned to his truck immediately and drove away. The store employee who rushed outside found him unresponsive within a minute. Paramedics called by a bystander arrived quickly, but he was pronounced dead at the scene. The bullet entered Samuel's chest at a downward angle, penetrating his left lung. Detectives secured the scene within 20 minutes, recovering the casing, a single slug from the pavement, and multiple cell phone recordings from nearby witnesses. Police located Victor at his residence just before midnight. The gun was still in his vehicle, one round missing from the magazine. During questioning, he admitted to confronting Samuel but claimed the shooting was accidental. He failed a gunshot residue test, and ballistic comparison later confirmed the recovered slug matched his firearm. At trial, prosecutors presented a clear timeline supported by digital evidence and surveillance footage. The defense argued provocation, citing months of public ridicule. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before finding Victor Salas guilty of second-degree murder. He received a 28-year sentence without parole. The strip mall where the shooting occurred quietly replaced its lot cameras with newer, high-resolution models. For Samuel's clients and colleagues, his death became a cautionary story about online escalation. It was November 14, 2016, in Marseilles, France. The narrow streets of the 6th arrondissement were unusually still, the smell of rain mixing with faint traces of yeast from the bakeries that defined the block. By dawn, that atmosphere would be gone, replaced by the flash of sirens and the scorched smell of fuel. Julien Mercier, 22, had been working at La Petite Brioche for just 6 months. He was quiet, careful, and often volunteered to stay late cleaning the proofers and kneading tables so the early team could start on time. He rented a modest apartment nearby and was known for saving nearly every euro for culinary school. His employer, Jean-Paul Martin, was respected for his skill, but infamous for his temper, especially toward Claude Morel, who owned the pastry shop next door. The two men had competed for customers for years, their feud extending from whispered complaints to public insults online. Julien avoided it, seeing himself as an employee, not a participant in the rivalry. Baking was physically demanding. Long hours, heat, and exact timing. Each night, Julien worked through rising temperatures and the low hum of industrial mixers, relying on routine and caution. The two shops shared a narrow service alley used for deliveries and trash disposal, lined with cardboard, flour bags, and empty crates. It wasn't unsafe, but the proximity meant that one accident could affect both establishments. Still, no one expected danger from outside. That Monday, Jean-Paul's frustration reached its peak. Days earlier, Claude had accused him of tax fraud publicly, embarrassing him before suppliers. Jean-Paul ranted to colleagues, threatening vague retaliation. Late that night, after locking up, Jean-Paul filled a fuel can from his garage, convinced that burning a few boxes behind Claude's store would send a message. He didn't know that Claude had asked Julien to stop by his bakery to help prep pastry dough for an early catering order. From reconstructed evidence, around midnight, Jean-Paul walked through the alley wearing gloves and a hooded jacket. He crouched at the rear entrance of Claude's pastry shop, poured accelerant over stacked cardboard, and struck a lighter. The fire ignited faster than he expected, feeding on the dry paper and plastic crates. Within seconds, it climbed the wall and flashed upward under the awning, creating a sudden surge of radiant heat. Jean-Paul fled immediately. Inside, Julien was rinsing trays when the lights flickered and smoke began seeping through the back door. He likely moved to investigate, but was met with a burst of superheated air from a flashover near the doorway. Two residents across the street reported seeing him at a side window, pounding against the glass as the interior filled with smoke. A neighbor's emergency call brought firefighters to the scene by 12:09 a.m., finding the structure engulfed. When they breached the rear, they discovered Julian collapsed near the exit, overcome by carbon monoxide. His burns were minimal, indicating death by asphyxiation. Forensic investigators recovered melted plastic traces consistent with fuel residue at the origin point. Security footage confirmed the masked arsonist's route, matching the frame of Jean-Paul's build. When questioned, he denied involvement, but later confessed after residue from the same accelerant was found on his gloves and jacket at home. In court, prosecutors demonstrated that while intent to kill was not proven, the deliberate ignition of flammable material caused a death. Jean-Paul Martin was convicted of involuntary homicide and aggravated arson, receiving an 18-year prison sentence. Julien's funeral was held quietly in his hometown of Avignon, attended by family, colleagues, and the few neighbors who knew him. The incident led to expanded fire safety inspections of small food businesses across Marseille, a silent acknowledgement that negligence and anger can burn far beyond their aim. It was August 22nd, 2015, in Cordoba, Argentina. The city was quieting after a humid Saturday, the kind of late winter evening when families filled roadside cafes before heading home. Streetlights blinked on along Avenida Rafael Núñez, illuminating the rows of parked cars and slow weekend traffic. Among them was a silver Renault Scenic, freshly serviced, its driver unaware that something beneath its frame had been left fatally altered. Diego Alvarez, 42, ran a small hardware store in the northern district. Known among friends as reliable and even-tempered, he balanced long work hours with coaching his son's youth soccer team on weekends. His life was defined by routine, steady work, steady income, and predictable commutes. He trusted local tradesmen and rarely questioned mechanical work, preferring to keep good relations with neighborhood service providers. That habit led him to a small repair shop managed by Rafael Delgado, a mechanic with a reputation for skill but an equally strong temper. Vehicles like Diego's Scenic required regular wheel alignment and hub checks due to the uneven road surfaces common around Cordoba's outskirts. It was standard service: removal, cleaning, torquing, and reseating of wheel nuts on fixed studs. The process demanded precision, but not specialized tools. On paper, there was nothing inherently dangerous about a routine service. But in mechanical systems, a single nut torqued incorrectly could turn a car into a weapon against itself. That week, Diego brought the car in for a brake inspection and tire rotation. When Rafael issued an inflated bill, Diego confronted him over what he called double charging. Witnesses recalled raised voices and Rafael pacing outside the office later that day. Surveillance from a nearby warehouse, later retrieved by investigators, captured Rafael returning to the yard after closing. He lingered near Diego's parked vehicle for several minutes, appearing to work on something near the front wheel before walking away. The following afternoon, Diego picked up the car, paid reluctantly, and tried to drive home. At 6:43 p.m., a municipal dashcam positioned along Avenida Gauss captured the moment everything went wrong. Diego's car drifted slightly right, corrected, then suddenly lurched left. The front wheel detached cleanly from the hub, bouncing ahead as the chassis dug into the pavement. The vehicle rolled once, striking a lamppost and landing on its roof. Witnesses rushed from nearby vehicles. Two men broke the passenger window and cut the seatbelt. Diego was semi-conscious, but pinned against the steering column. Paramedics arrived within minutes, but he succumbed to chest trauma before reaching the hospital. Police impounded the wreck and began a technical inspection. Mechanics documented cross-threaded and partially loosened wheel nuts, inconsistent torque pressure, and distinct tool markings suggesting deliberate tampering. Microscopic residue from the wheel studs matched traces found on gloves Rafael was using. When confronted, Rafael claimed sabotage by another worker, but forensic alignment between his wrench set and the damage pattern closed the case. Rafael Delgado was charged with aggravated homicide and found guilty. Prosecutors cited motive, opportunity, and physical evidence showing calculated tampering. He received a 23-year sentence. Diego's widow petitioned the provincial legislature for mandatory surveillance in licensed garages, a measure proposed later that year and enacted the following spring. Today, most workshops in Cordoba operate under continuous camera coverage, a direct result of a tragedy that began with pride, ended in negligence, and cost a family its center. Thanks for watching. Liked these stories? Click here for more.